Welcome to the Workshop Therapy Podcast. I'm your host, Andrew, and joining me today is Andre Szucs, owner and CEO and master designer of Marginal Gain. You want to say hi?
All right. Thanks for having me, Andrew.
Oh, thanks for coming on. As we were discussing in the pre-show, this is kind of, you're kind of outside of my normal community of interaction. So why don't you give a little bit of a introduction to yourself to the people who are not patrons? This is a plug where, we obviously already talked and now people will be so interested that they'll want to go sign up to Patreon, right?
Got it.
But
yeah,
give yourself a little bit of an intro and who you are, what you do, and all that.
Well, thanks for the intro. Yeah, I mean those are interesting status for who I am in Marginal Gain right now. But yeah, I mean, I am in the space of the cycling componentry. I really enjoy just creating new ideas and just going through the critical thinking of how components can be better or modified, or, if I can improve a little bit, that experience, why not, right? So yes, I'm the creator of Marginal Gain. It's at its infancy right now, just going through the formal process to make this a brand and hopefully create this platform where I can really have the freedom to keep having those ideas and just put that into something material that I can display to the community and have a general interest in.
So by bike components, you're talking about like cranksets and gears and shifters and headsets, all that type of, like, anything that you bolt onto a bike then, right?
Yes, technically right now the area of focus is the drivetrain of a bicycle. I think I have a combination of products in mind that combined they can make a very compelling product out there. But the ambition is it's there, and we just got to start small. We got to start with something as a kickoff product, for the community to see that what are we up to, and hopefully we can make it into the main product very soon.
Yeah. So the reason I reached out to you, I've been following you for a while, and I noticed you switched from the Monster Gravel was your original account. You switched that to Marginal Gain. So I've talked about marginal gains on here, the aggregation of marginal gains. What's the Sir Dave Brailsford? Isn't that the British cycling coach that kind of popularized marginal gains? Is that kind of where your name got inspired by? Or
yes, I would say marginal gain can be used in many areas. Of course, the original concept came from the training his athletes, to the full potential. And the theory is, if you can increment small increments over time, the cumulative increments, eventually you can have the results you're looking for. And it's the 1% theory, right? And I'm basically converting that concept to basically anything in life, but specifically in this situation is, if I can improve bicycle components to that 1% concept, that can improve efficiency, or it can improve a little lighter, or let's put it this way. I think the area of focus is human-powered bicycles. I am not really interested at this point on e-bikes, bicycles with motors. So, of course, a human powered machine, it will never compare to an e-bike, right? So any increment in that space propelled by a human, that is a considerable increment. So I think that's my approach with the marginal gain in bicycle components.
You made me think of a video I saw a little while ago. Have you seen that one where they're talking about this guy? He's a legend in bicycle racing, and he wins all of these races, and then they go to interview him, and he's riding a motorbike, and he says, "Well, I identify as a bicyclist," and anyway, made me laugh.
Right.
But
yes, I know what you mean. Yeah.
Strictly human powered, though.
Yes.
So in the pre-show, we talked a little bit about, so you're an amputee from birth, missing a leg. For me, I've been fully functional my entire life for the most part, maybe not mentally so, but physically I've been able to do pretty much whatever I wanted. What inspired you then to be like, mountain biking isn't exactly something I would be my first thought of something to try doing if you use a prosthetic every day?
I think because it was a congenital condition, it wasn't a traumatic event that led to having an amputation. So for me, it was a lifetime as an amputee, and that to me it resonates as something just a second nature. Like I was mentioning earlier, is just like I put my shoes in the morning, I'll put my prosthetic leg in the morning. I'll go by my day, and if I want to be active, I think the exercise and pushing the physical limits always made sense to me, because that's how I could explore my limitations, right? My physical limitations. What can I do as an amputee? And being realistic about it. Of course, I mean, I'm probably not going to, I don't have the height or the agility as an amputee to become a basketball player, for example. So I need to be realistic on the things that I can do, right? Like everybody else. So bottom line, it doesn't make any difference comparing to anyone else. We're just exploring our limits like everybody else.
Yeah, and I think that's actually really important to think about. You used the example of like putting on your reading glasses, your prescription glasses. You look around at all of these people in the world that wear glasses. Once again, I'm one of those people who's blessed to not have to wear glasses, but that's not seen as a disability. So you just put on your glasses and you're going about your business, right? And it's been the same for you. And why mountain biking in particular, though? Is there something specifically about mountain biking that you enjoy more so than anything else, or?
I think I would. I need to go back to 1992. That's when I first acquired a mountain bike, and I think I was just having some friends at school, and one of those friends had a mountain bike, and he said, "Hey, let's just go riding." And then, I was 12 years old, and then I asked my parents to get a bike for me, and we started biking every single weekend. It was awesome. I quickly understood the benefits of cycling, physically and also mentally, and again, pushing the limits as an amputee. What kind of trails I can do, what can I push my bike uphill, if I can't make it, clear it biking. So it was really just testing my physical limits with that, and I fell in love with the cycling aspect of it, and again, just always adapting my environment. And I always, I've been always involved in that critical thinking of how things around me can be modified or changed or improved.
Well, that's one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, because you mentioned, I don't have to get into any specifics that you're currently working on, but one of the things I get asked about occasionally is, and I've brought up, are you familiar with the creative cliff illusion at all?
No.
Okay. So in one of the early episodes of this podcast, it was one of the research articles that I had presented as an interesting thing. So the creative cliff illusion is people have a false understanding of how creativity works, right? People look at creative people and they think, oh, they must just have all of these creative ideas in a thing, and then the rest of us don't have creativity, right? Or alternatively, when you're brainstorming ideas, people have they mistake volume for creativity, right? And so you think about, let's brainstorm up a bunch of ideas, and you have 50 ideas, and then that slowly tails off and you can't think of anything else. And then you have, one idea or two ideas. And so there's this massive drop off in the volume of ideas. But the reality of creativity is it's actually a long-term sustained thing, and creativity actually goes up with time the more time you spend thinking about things. And so I'm just curious, what's your process for brainstorming new ideas? Because things like bicycles, they are, let's be honest, they're really simple.
Yeah,
overall,
nice.
Like they're complexly simple. Like really, you have a crank, some gears, a chain, a derailleur with, and a frame and some wheels.
Right.
I mean, you can obviously go down the monkey or the rabbit hole and go all sorts of craziness, but that's the basic gist of it. How do you become creative around those parameters?
Yeah, I like what you mentioned there on that theory. I think my experience with creativity is it truly is a process. It's a chain of events, and also my take is not being afraid of failing. I think you got to start somewhere, because if you have this first idea over something, and then And then you have to actually see it. I'm very visual, so I have to see it first. And then from that first step of making that small change, it might trigger a second idea that connects to the first one. And then you have now an improved step from the first step. And then it trickles down to a third step and then a fourth step. And then eventually you have this final product that was originated by your very first critical thinking of that, specific idea you want to do. So it is not afraid of failing, and also why not sharing with the community? Because if minds, thinking alike, we can come up with something even greater. It's never, coming from one source. Why not sharing that and then having a combined source to create that final product? So
yeah. Well, and that's the other thing about this creative cliff illusion thing. One of the first papers that I read about it, they talked about how creativity isn't a flash of new insight that is completely different than anything else. It's most often a combination or a recombination of already existing knowledge in a new way or in a new perspective. And so you're right, having that more than just your perspective looking at it can often bring up those unique insights and new products.
Yeah. I think it is a sequencing process. Like I was saying, I mean, you just develop this first step, and then you look I like to take an outlook from it, right? I kind of step back a little, and then I look again. Okay, now I have this item that it wasn't there before, and now I can look back and see what else can we do here, and then I move on to a second step. But I would not be able to get to the second step if I wasn't creating the first one. So it's not, you don't have, you have this like abstract idea. Generally speaking, you have this abstract modification you want to do, but it kind of starts taking shape once you got to start somewhere. Really.
Yeah. And you make, I think that's one of the things that we often get messed up on when we're trying to create something new is like taking a bicycle for an example. I mean, you can have this idea of, I wonder if square wheels will make a difference, right? And so you throw on the square wheels and you discover that was a really bad idea.
Yeah.
And you can either embrace that as a failure of what not to do, or you can give up, right? So what keeps you motivated to not give up if you run into a roadblock?
Well, I think as I was mentioning, I first started with the Monster Gravel page, and then I was just sharing and posting those individual, smaller ideas and modifications, and then eventually I came up with a bigger, more significant idea that I really believe it can be something, out of the best interest of the community for cycling. And, so I think the confidence, and after, again, the visual is very important. So I do a lot of designing, a lot of 3D modeling, so I can really see things in 3D model and put that in perspective and comparing different componentries. And so after I saw that final setup, I was so confident about it that is really igniting this whole initiative and keeping me motivated to get to that point. And I'm fully aware, it just doesn't happen overnight. You have to start somewhere, start small, and eventually walking towards that final goal. I think that's the adventure I'm starting with Marginal Gain right now.
Yeah. You actually brought up kind of the next question I was going to ask you. So you said you do a lot of 3D modeling and stuff. What do you use for that? Are you like a Fusion, SolidWorks, SketchUp?
Yeah, I do SolidWorks. Yeah. Yep. Okay. That's the software I use.
How long have you been doing that?
I mean, I've been doing it for a while. This is not my first rodeo in terms of trying to create something. And I've gone through like a provisional patent in the past, but that was in the prosthetics and orthotics. I think that was probably in 2015, 14. That's when I first started designing. And so, yeah, I do have that experience with I'm very comfortable with just putting any idea, into something that I can see on a 3D model. And that helps a lot in the creative process. Again, you go from an abstract idea to something visual, and then now you can have you can have a very good sense of how that's going to operate.
Mm-hmm. So as a woodworker, I'm very straight line oriented. That's easy for me to visualize. So what type of, when you were learning 3D modeling, what type of references do you use to learn those organic shapes that a prosthetic would?
Yeah, my
would
area.
require?
So basically, a prosthetic device there's three main components: the socket, where it fits the patient. It's a very intimate fitting to the limb, the residual limb. And then you have the pylon, the tubing and the clamps that connects to the socket. And then at the very bottom, you have the connection to the foot itself. So you can either have three components or sometimes even two. So sometimes the foot itself connects straight to the socket. So it's a very simple device as well.
Yeah, I guess so. Because, you're just so completely sidetracking. Now I'm curious. How do you go about making sure that it fits the person? Is that a lot of mold taking or 3D scanning or a combination of the both? Or
yeah, it is the most important part of a prosthetic device is the fitting of the socket. So that is a process that a patient needs to go through a prosthetist, a clinician. Today they call it clinicians, and you schedule an appointment and then they sit, and then they make a cast, a mold out of that residual limb. And that cast there's a positive and negative. Eventually they have a test socket, and then out of that test socket, they make a final socket with a carbon fiber usually, which is very light, and you can still heat mold the carbon fiber. And that's how you make a proper fitting, but it's an overtime too. It takes a couple of months really to have a final socket comfortable, with the patient.
Yeah. So when you're mountain biking stuff, your marginal gain product development, how did that flow out of your prosthetics then with the whole creativity? Did you just have this light bulb moment of, hey, I have this skill set that now I can apply to this as well, or was it like an intentional, I want to try doing this sort of thing?
Well, so the association that I'm going to make on this is, into marginal gain and cycling, the condition of an amputee or a prosthetic device is no longer related per se. What I can pull from that is just a creativity process, from that space, and especially me as a amputee since birth, going through that, again, critical thinking of everything I see around me. I could bring that to the cycling space, but it's no longer related. The only, like I was saying, is just it's a passion that I have on bicycle components, and I just love that the creativity process of it, and I think I have something that is very substantial, as a final product line eventually. And I am ready to, jump into that adventure. So we'll see.
So do you have any experience with machining and stuff? Because obviously if you're going to be making stuff out of metal for bikes, those components, you're going to have them manufactured or
right.
Do you have any experience with that or?
So right now in this initial phase, we are outsourcing from companies in Asia. At this point, I'm prototyping and ordering samples from that manufacturing in Asia. But of course, the main goal, the final goal, it would be to have the capabilities in the US. And I think that's kind of a, if you ask me where do I see myself in 5 years, that's kind of my goal, is to have something like that in the US. Hopefully less than 5 years, right?
Well, fingers crossed. Hopefully it's next year, right? That's
next year. There we go.
Yep. Yeah. I should keep my mouth shut. Your marvelous president there, if he has his way, you're going to,
right.
It's going to be getting more expensive to get stuff overseas anyway.
Yes, it is. Yes. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah. So do you have any experience with 3D printing or anything? Because that's a pretty accessible way to get yourself a prototype, maybe not a semi-functional prototype pretty quickly now.
Yes, the nature of those components that I'm creating, something can be done with 3D print. I do own a printer just for basic, small components, but it's never the same as an actual sample with the proper material for the intended use. But I can at least check for fitting and things like that. But it's not. I do have that knowledge, and yeah, we make it work. But it's not enough. It's never the same as an actual sample. And I do have this relationship with this company in Asia. We've been working on this for about a year now, doing a lot of prototyping, and Now I am familiar with the quality of the product, and it's just a matter of now finalizing going through all the steps of prototyping, and of course all the formal, provisional patent on, and after doing a provisional patent, and then I can probably start promoting it online. So for now, everything is kind of under wrap. It's hard for me to not say much. I want to overshare, but at the same time, I know it's counterproductive if I do it. So
no problem. I was just curious. What I'm curious about is that whole creative process for people, because I mean, maybe it's just me, but I think everybody probably has those flashbulb moments of, hey, that would make a product. But then you file it away on the back shelf of your mind, and then you don't think about it, because I know I've had a couple experiences where I was doing something, and I was like, what would make this better is if I did this, but it's going to take a lot of work, blah blah blah. So I put it in the back of my head, and then a couple of years later, I see on the market the thing, right? And I'm curious of the process, because the next time I have the thing pop into my head, or I'm thinking about it, I want to be able to create it. And exactly. That's one of the reasons why I bought a 3D printer, is because I know that you're right. Like if it needs to be made out of metal, it needs to be made out of metal. But you can make the thing out of plastic and fit it into place and see if it functions. And if it immediately breaks because it's plastic, but it functioned for that 30 seconds, then you can know that you can take the next step and make it out of metal, right? But I wonder how many people out there have those moments of, I should do that, but they don't.
Right.
And so they end up never going down the marginal gain route or whatever.
This is a good question. I mean, this is exactly my epiphany, for years. How many times I remember, just even as a kid, as a 13, 14 years old, I mean, just walking to my parents' car, for example, and look at the dash of the car, and look at the vent. I mean, what if the vent was this shape, this angle? What if that button was different? Or what if the radio was positioning this way? So I always, all those what ifs, my entire life. And, anywhere I go, if I look at this, this computer in front of me, or if I look at my prosthetic devices, the bicycle, I mean, in so many instances, I remember just having those what ifs. And that's the thing. I mean, you have those ideas and they kind of float in the air, right? Because you don't do anything about it. You just kind of float in the air. And then you run into the situation, like you just said. I mean, someone will grab that from the air and do something about it. And then eventually, a couple of years later, you're going to see it on the market. And yeah, you kind of, reconsider, when should I be just leaving it up in the air or actually doing something about it? And I think that's the whole motivation for Marginal Gain, is enough is enough. I don't want to be just having those what if moments and just leaving as a theory. I think Marginal Gain is a platform for me to really exercise that process and see it, and having something material, and then eventually, well, if this is a compelling product, and not afraid to fail. I mean, if it doesn't work, well, let's move on to another product. It's not going to be the end of my day if it doesn't work. You just keep improving it. Eventually you have something. So
yeah, it's you're going to turn the what if into that's what.
Right.
And that's, I forget which book I was reading or listening to now, but he was talking about the generation of good ideas. And I think he was quoting Steve Jobs or somebody like that. And, he was talking about how you have 1,000 good ideas for every great idea. And so it's important to work through all these good ideas, but it's also important to go, is this a great idea or is this a good idea? Or is just an idea? And so you don't waste. Maybe he went on to talk about this whole thing about make sure you don't waste your time on the good ideas. Search for the great ideas.
Right.
But I've been kind of thinking about that ever since. But if you don't start working on the idea, whether it's good, bad, or great, you don't develop that extra creativity in your head. You don't develop that creative muscle to actually go on through the process.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I can even mention two situations where, back in the prosthetics, world, that was back in 2013 or something like that. The provisional patent I filed was for like a hybrid foot that I could do. I could walk comfortably, and I could also, run on the same devices instead of having to swap devices. So I went through all that process of improving that idea, right? And then one of those events that I was in, I mean, some people just, they were asking me questions about that device because it was just custom made. I made it all at my house. And I was wearing it in this device, it's a public display of this modification I made, right? And some people from this highly known company came up and started wondering about it. And then a year and a half later, it was on the market. So that modification, that some people showed up and just start asking questions, but they had the capability and the company to make it happen, and they put it in the market later on. So that was one example. And the second example now with the Monster Gravel. Oh yeah, what if, again, John Tomic did this in the 80s, putting drop bars on bicycles, mountain bikes with drop bars. But then I kind of, what if we do serious suspensions with drop bars, and why not full suspension? So you can go on very technical, challenging terrains and at the same time develop good speed on the asphalt. And it's interesting to see all the comments, people commenting on, and of course we have all the, the haters and things, challenging you. And I always took those comments as a learning process for me and for them, for everybody. I never took any of those comments as, something negative and, it's going to affect me whatsoever. And then, soon after that, I mean, a couple of athletes, they started using again on gravel racings, and then now it's a thing, I was just happy to be part of that community, that movement of, putting drop bars on mountain bikes.
Yeah, it's always from the woodworking community. There used to be a lot of blowback about a festool domino. I don't know if you know what that is at all or not, but it's a joinery cutting machine, right? And it used to be like when they first came out, everybody was all, that's not real woodworking, blah blah blah, and all the negative comments, and then and then CNC machines and blah blah blah. But I always think to myself, I bet you someday back in the 10,000 years ago, 50,000 years ago, whatever it is, there was Thog sitting there with his rock scraping at the stick, and then the next caveman breaks off a piece of flint and discovers it's sharp, and the first guy goes, well, that's not woodworking. That's not tradition.
Yeah, that's how I see it. I mean, everything we see around us today was created by some crazy person back then. Now they're not so crazy anymore.
Exactly.
In general,
I was whenever I start thinking about these ideas, or like these, like patenting ideas and having creativity moments. I remember watching this movie with my wife. Then I think she was my girlfriend, fiance, when we watched it. It was like some horrible romantic comedy type of movie, and the love interest, the male love interest in this movie, he was rich for this invention that he had, and it kind of didn't tell you what the invention was until like halfway into the movie or something out, and it turns out he's the guy that invented the little paper sleeve that goes around a coffee cup, right, to insulate your hand, and and it always stuck with me that he's like, yeah, it's a stupid idea, and I only make a half a cent per sleeve, but I have the patent and they sell millions of them, right? And so ever since watching that, I always like, what type of ideas can you have that are like throw away, that's a stupid idea, that ends up being the idea that makes you successful, or that revolutionizes mountain biking or woodworking or car safety, whatever your interest is, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. it is taking it seriously. It's the time. That's the moment of taking those random ideas seriously now. It's no longer putting on the back of your brain and going by your day. So I think that's the process that I'm just really passionate about, and it's time to make this a fruitful thing. So
yeah, well, we had that brief glitch in my internet there, and I think my internet keeps popping up and saying it's kind of crummy here again. So I think what we should do is we should wrap up the conversation here.
Yeah.
And then we'll hop over to the after show for a bit. So again, thanks for coming on. Thanks for sharing a few minutes with me and talking about creativity in your process. Do you want to tell people where to find you again, and then we'll go over to the after show?
Yeah, so my website is marginalgain.co, and also on Instagram, just so you can find me as Marginal Gain.
Thank you very much.
Nasty, sneaky patrons is always giving us their support, always helping the Workshop Therapy podcast. Yes, they thinks they are clever. They thinks they are generous. We doesn't like them. Oh no, we doesn't. But they does help precious. They keep the podcast alive. They keeps the lights on. Yes. Oh, we must thank them, mustn't we? No thank yous. They takes our time. They takes our energy, but they give us Patreon gold. Yes. Shiny support. Fine. We thanks the founding father patrons, nasty though they be. Matthew from Artigiano Serio, always building things, always crafting, thinks he is clever, yes. Brad of Brad's Customs, twisting metal, shaping wood, tricksy hands, tricksy mind. Keith of Blackthorn Concepts, Blackthorn, thorns are sharp, he is sharp too, oh yes. Eric of Overall Makerworks, overalls always working, always making, never stops. Brandon of Tectonic Creations, the ground moves beneath him, shifting, shaking, always changing. The Grant Alexander, what makes him the one? But he is great, yes, precious. We admits it, we likes them a little, just a little. But if they ever stop supporting, yes, we will remembers. Thank you, precious patrons, keep supporting, keep listening. Yes, good patronses.